Happy Monday and welcome to the Osceola.com Seminole Sidelines. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer for the Osceola.com. That is Bob Ferrante, the editor of the Osceola.com. Welcome to the show on a Monday that had every right to be just as boring of a Monday in terms of Florida State football news as the last Monday. And it probably would have been one of those Mondays, Bob Ferrante, if it weren't for quite a firework display of a press conference from Mike Norvell today. What can I say, Bob? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again. And apparently in a situation where this coach and this program has seemingly lacked juice for the better part of this season, there was quite a press conference today from Mike Norvell. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the show. We do have to recap and just talk a little bit about what we saw on Saturday. Obviously, you were up there at Death Valley in that environment, which, say what you want, those fans definitely filled out that stadium. Maybe not the most hostile Death Valley has ever been, Bob Ferrante, but it certainly was a hostile environment for Florida State. It was a great environment for Clemson and those fans in a game that I don't know how you feel about it, Bob. It felt like at points Florida State should be up by multiple touchdowns. You look at the scoreboard and they're down by multiple touchdowns, and you just kind of leave that game shaking your head because really, I think you can pinpoint a bunch of things in each of Florida State's losses this season. Lack of effort, penalties, lack of execution. I think specifically when you look at Clemson in a microcosm, you keep that in a bubble. It was purely because the team just failed to execute in key moments in that game. And it was problems that were very easily replicated from last season. Obviously, drops, unfortunate penalties, bad special teams. That was a lot of last year's issues that showed up in this game on the road against Clemson. Pretty much every single coordinator, and including Coach Norvell himself, said that a lot of this was uncharacteristic for his football team this season. And I think there are degrees that where you can give him a little bit of grace and say, yeah, it was a little bit uncharacteristic, especially the drops by Jalen Lucas and Randy Pittman being the one that's going to be etched into the memories of all Florida State fans' minds. And when you think back and look at this game, what was kind of your takeaway from the game, Bob, being up there in that environment? Do you kind of agree with my sentiment that it felt like this was a game that Florida State should have been ahead by maybe 2 touchdowns at the most? I mean, there was just a lot of points left on that football field.
It felt like the opportunities were certainly there. It felt like the defense honestly played well enough, put the team in position to win the game. I know you can fault the defense for certain things. You know, Mike Norvell's mentioned missed tackles on that opening drive. I would say Clemson scripted the opening drive, gets a touchdown. Clemson's only other touchdown is off the sudden change, off that 4th down, ball off the hands of Randy Pittman's hands. So really, otherwise, I thought Florida State's defense did its job, holding Clemson to field goals, holding the Tigers to 24 points. The bummer is all the offensive mistakes. And Nick, I felt like it was 10 guys were on the football field doing their job or doing just about anything close to right. And it was just the one guy where it was just falling short. It was either a Castellanos pass that was off the mark or too far. It was a receiver drop. There were 5 of them. There was the 2 Lewayne McCoy penalties. I think it was hands to the face on Micah Pettis, the right tackle. Yep. So there were a lot of things like that. If we could rewrite one play, it'd be really phenomenal to rewrite the Randy Pittman catch, because that's probably a touchdown, if not in the red zone on the doorstep of a touchdown. And then maybe, just maybe, Clemson's got a full field to have to come back with off a kickoff. So maybe you can rewrite how do those potential scores change a 24-10 game that's obviously very, very close. But again, I think we talked about this, Nick, in the summer, that Tommy Castellanos was not going to be the quarterback to bring a team back from a considerable deficit. Florida State's facing an 18-0 deficit late second quarter, then facing that 24-7 deficit. I think it was that was early fourth quarter, right? That game is not winnable the way Florida State wants to play, the way you need to run to set up the pass, to have that complementary run pass mix. When you're throwing, I believe it was 43 times that Tommy dropped back or scrambled to then throw. you're not running enough. That's
Yeah.
not the way Florida State wins on offense. So similarities, like a lot of storylines that we had seen from 25, and like you said, some storylines that reared their heads from 2024 too.
And I think untimely a lot of the mistakes that happened during this game. I just think if you want to look back, and it may be the biggest mistake from a coaching perspective, because obviously it's not Mike Norvell that's out there dropping passes. It's not Tony White that's out there, or Gus Malzahn that's out there doing offensive pass interference, even though some of those OPI calls were a little ticky tack. I think maybe the mistake in this ball game that's really on the coaching, and to a certain extent it is all on the coaching. It's maybe feeling a little bit desperate going forward on that fourth down, and obviously you hit that play, you look like a genius. I think you need to understand the fragility of the mentality of this football team, and understanding that, hey, going for it, the implications, if you're going forward on your own 35, you don't get it, you give Clemson a short field at home. And then, among other things, the fragility of having that happen after, I believe, Tommy Castellanos and was it Sawchuck or was it Singleton that botched the read option? I think it was Singleton that
I
was
think it
in
was
there.
Singleton. I think so. Yeah.
Those are on back-to-back drives, or at least in very close proximity to one another in terms of those drives. The mental fragility of this football team is something that I have keyed in on the past couple of weeks, and it's something that we've talked about on Seminole Sidelines. May have been a kiss of death for this football team in that game. I don't think that the team stopped trying, but at that point, I think you're looking at the scoreboard, and it's very tough to overcome in that instance. Do you feel like the fourth down call, as great of a call as it was? I think Gus dialed up a perfect play, and that's the real stinker in all this. We probably wouldn't be ripping this call if Randy Pittman caught the ball. Maybe a little bit of a better, tighter spiral from Tommy Castellanos. You wrenching it, he's down the field, and he's likely scoring on that play. We might not be sitting here questioning that play call. Do you think it was desperate? Do you think it was maybe a little bit too soon to try and grab back momentum in that ball game, or grab really anything to hold on to?
I think my problem is I tend to lean on punt and pin because you want to not put your defense in a bad position. But I acknowledge and understand what Mike Norvell's DNA is, and he wants to go for it on fourth down. He's going to go for it regardless of where you are on the Florida State side of the field, the opponent side of the field. I totally get it. And I mean, we can all second guess this one because it didn't play out. But man, I think Gus Malzahn called a great play, was clearly going to go toward Randy Pittman, a guy who had been – Randy is so valuable to this team. And I've been kind of that guy that loves Pittman because I see what he does as a blocker and what doesn't maybe show up in the box score. I kind of love that I think Gus called the player and not necessarily the play there. He called, that's my guy. I'm going to go to him. I know him from UCF. I trust him. It's on the road. So I get it. I really, really do get it. And I think it was just a tough of all the guys that happened to. I kind of cringe because part of me has liked Randy all along. And
I know you've really been on the Randy Pittman bandwagon. Not even a bandwagon. You've been on the. It's not a wagon. A bus. One of Norvell's Mazda CXR 60s or whatever they're called. Whatever vehicle you want to be on. I don't. Bandwagon sounds so negative. You've liked Pittman since the summer.
Yeah, and I think that's what's tough is that's one of your premier guys. Like when you need a play, it was going to go to Deuce. That's right. It was going to go to Deuce, or it was going to go to Randy, right? It was going to go to the guys that you trust. And it felt like a great, great call. So I don't fault that one, but man, when it does backfire, it's going to spectacularly backfire on you. And that's the unfortunate roll of the dice.
This Clemson game being one that was just the next in the line of this is now the biggest game of Mike Norvell's career. It's been an incremental climb. Maybe that's what we're climbing these days at Florida State football, is we're climbing the stakes in terms of how much more of a big of a game it's going to be for Mike Norvell in terms of whatever may end up being the remainder of his tenure at Florida State. But this game just felt massive in terms of implications. Obviously, you saw what the team was capable against Wake Forest, and that's a Wake Forest team that went and upset Virginia at Virginia the following week. Maybe that shows the caliber of the ACC. Maybe it doesn't, but still, you put belt to ass against Wake Forest at home. Maybe you would have loved to carry over that momentum into Clemson, and it felt like a Clemson team that was sitting at 3-5 and was just kind of expecting things to go wrong. Like when I'm reading the body language and I'm reading the performance of that Clemson team, yeah, you have the back-breaking first drive, but after the scripted plays were done, it kind of felt like Clemson was giving Florida State an opportunity to really get back into that game and take control of it. They never did. They squandered all of those opportunities, and that's what I think you would lament when you go back and you watch that game. Here we are again, Bob, and it feels like the coin has been flipped straight back to the negative. It's a week-by-week thing. It's fluid, as we've said over and over again on the show. Now we're once again stuck in a position where you are coming off a very lackluster performance and you're kind of showing who you are. You know, the saying is, if somebody shows you who you are to believe them. At this point, is this who this football team is? Do we have to accept that this is what this football team is, or is there any remnant of hope that you can have Virginia Tech come in this next week at Doak, get to that 5th win, and then you're playing for bowl eligibility on a Friday night in Raleigh, North Carolina?
I think this is where I'm going to lean on my favorite saying, both things can be true. I think the DNA of Florida State as a team is they're going to make too many mistakes and make the game more than it needs to be. This game is played between white lines. It's played between the ears. I think there's a lot of smart Florida State football players. Again, I've never said that they're dumb at all, but man, there's self-confidence. There's putting pressure on yourselves. Is there self-doubt? What is it, right? Why do they play so poorly on the road? We haven't seen a road win in the ACC in 2 years since that Pittsburgh game. That's tough. That's tough to even kind of wrap your head around. But then you look at, again, the schedule was always favorable. We've always leaned on that one too. Virginia Tech has a good mobile thrower of the ball. Is he a great passer? Is he a great quarterback? I don't know. Not really. But can that mobility really make things interesting against Florida State, which is oddly, I think, a 14-point favorite? That feels really, really weird considering everything that's going on here. I think if you're looking at positives, Florida State plays pretty well at home, going to have a good crowd at night. It may not be sold out, right? That Wake game was not sold out, but it could be a really good crowd, 7:30, whatever. I think that's a good atmosphere for Florida State. Honestly, Nick, conversely, the best thing Clemson had going for it pregame, that Clemson fan base was fired up.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a really good Clemson team, but that home field edge was certainly worth something.
The worst team in 2 decades.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that fan base really energized Clemson. And now we've heard it a good bit from the Florida State folks. I think even Tommy Castellanos has kind of referenced this. You know, we have fed off the home crowd. Can they do that against Virginia Tech? Then you push it forward to the discussion of NC State and Florida. I mean, literally, Florida State is playing 3 of the toughest home field advantages in many regards, not the toughest teams, but at Clemson, at NC State, at Florida, probably 3 of the worst ways to finish out your November when you've got players, coaches that need wins, when you're looking at a discussion like bowl eligibility even. These are tough discussions to have when you know what the road games look like and you know what the road schedules have been.
Yeah. And it's not to move the goalposts in terms of what will not keep Mike his job at the end of the season. I think this is very fluid. I think that President McCullough, Michael Alford, Chair Peter Collins, all of those guys are constantly evaluating the situation at hand and what needs to be done and what may be done. But right now it feels like if they're not going to fire him after a Clemson loss, they're not going to fire him after a Stanford loss. It feels like this is going to go the full distance. I mean, they kind of told us that this was going to go the full distance, Bob, but I feel like it's fair for a lot of us to have had doubts almost a month ago at this point that it would actually carry into the rest of the season. You and I talked last week about the chances of Mike Norvell's being retained is greatly increased with a victory over a rival. Saturday was probably the better shot out of the two in order to be. I mean, Clemson was so beatable. That was such a beatable Clemson team, and I felt like they were almost being prepared to be beaten. Like, I was not impressed whatsoever with their performance on the football field. Just Florida State failed to execute in key moments. I say that to say this, knowing what you have left in front of you. You mentioned it, the road test at Raleigh. That is going to be tough. That is going to be extremely tough, especially for a football team that is mentally fragile as this one is. Florida did lay an egg against Kentucky as well on Saturday, and it's a week-to-week thing. You don't know how they're going to look the next 2 weeks, but you're staring down the barrel. Let's say that you do get it done against Virginia Tech. You're one win away from bowl eligibility. You're probably going to have to beat a rival to be able to get that done. Do you feel like that is more possible than it was a couple of weeks ago now, seeing what Florida looked like last weekend, knowing that this Florida State team is capable, just not showing it on the football field?
I think the argument for wanting to beat a rival is significant. Like, that's great momentum going into the offseason. The argument for a bowl game is those practices for player development, whether you're talking about veterans, guys who might come back, or your 24 signees, your 25 signees. You need to get those guys on the field. For as disjointed as the bowl season has become outside of the playoff, those are points to develop. It's almost the same length as a spring practice window, if you want to look at it that way. Can they do it? Statistically, yes. The doubts that I have are obviously, man, this team cannot pull it together on the road. And I've seen enough crazy things happen in Raleigh. That's not honestly, I'd put Raleigh as a loss on paper, just because this team has never historically performed well in that stadium. That sideline's really tight. It's just
Indian burial ground over top of Carter Finley.
Bad history, right? I think Florida State's got a better shot to go win at Florida, because you don't know what that Gator team is going to be fighting for. Hopefully, not fighting for very much, right? From the Florida State perspective. From the Florida perspective, they obviously laid an egg after being competitive against Georgia. What are they going to look like for an interim coach? If they have 5 wins, maybe they're in position to get to a bowl game, that they want to get to a bowl game. But this feels like this is Florida State's opportunity. Again, I have felt all along the toughest team in Florida State's schedule was really themselves. It is overcoming their own issues and truly almost anxieties, overcoming their inability to put out their best performances on the football field. Nick, the coaches say that the players are doing well in practice, whether that's coach speak, whether it's something else. Maybe they're seeing something still on the practice field, and then it's not translating in a lot of these road situations. But it's just not clicking. And again, Florida State can't fall behind in these games. It's fine to fall behind by a touchdown. That happens. That's football. But man, you can't fall behind. You go down mathematically 3 scores, and it happened a couple times against Clemson. And I kind of looked around and just said, I don't see the rally all the way back. You see a desire for this team to fight. Like, this team is not quitting. I really don't think it's quitting. But that fight is just, it's not appropriately harnessed, I think, from the start, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think for me personally, after they gave up the flea flicker on basically the same look that Miami hit on, it was just a post route instead of a corner route. I can't remember if no, it might have been a post route. It might have been a post from the opposite hash. Same look, same bite by the safeties, except it was Edwin Joseph this time instead of Earl Little that got bit on it. I thought that was a pretty piss poor effort by Edwin Joseph in the end zone as well. I mean, we may not be in practices this year, Bob, but if there's one thing that we've heard plenty of when attending a Mike Norvell practice is catch the ball with 2 hands. He loves screaming that. And Edwin went up with 1 hand instead of 2. Honestly, it felt like he hardly got off the ground. But after that, I felt like I basically said, okay, I don't think this team is mentally capable of coming back from that. And maybe the offense did have its chances. Obviously, you get a score right before the half. You get a chance to go down, make it an actual football game, that first possession of that second half. And Jake Weinberg, who's been good. He's been good this year. an untimely miss
Yep.
from him, which kind of sets things back, and things just unraveled from there. Did want to you kind of touched on this just a little bit, but Island Boy says, what difference does it make if you fire him now or later? Just fire him already. And that's really the big question. That's the question that I think a lot of us are struggling with, because you have your pros and your cons. And obviously we preached the pros all the way back during the Stanford week of why it would make sense to fire Mike Norvell before a bye week with a couple of games to go. Now, I think it's very apparent that this administration doesn't have it in them to fire him right now. Whatever they're holding out for, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. And I don't think that they're 100% unwilling to fire him right now. I think that if it absolutely got bad enough, they would fire him. And of course, now you're saying, well, what is bad enough? This team has already been an embarrassment this season, right? There's some tangle up somewhere that's preventing a move. And at this point, I think really at this point, Bob, we're probably going to see him last the rest of the season. You would have to imagine at this point, you're not going to fire him after a rivalry loss to Clemson. You're not going to fire him after one of the program's worst losses to an ACC foe, in Stanford. We sit here and analyze the pros and cons of firing Norvell pretty much every single week, and we all come out with kind of the same conclusion. What are they waiting for? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but it's something. And it's probably a combination of a lot of factors, between the money, between Norvell as a person, between the fact that this team in some moments in these games does show fight for their head coach. It's not completely lost. It's probably a conglomerate of all those things. But to pass on the question, it's like, what are we waiting for? We ask this every single week. And at this point, is there a chance that they're saying, well, we're already close to the end of the season. Let's just ride this pony home until it runs out of gas and dies at the finish line?
And I think what we don't know is who are the potential candidates. Now, nothing to say that Michael Alford or whomever is making phone calls and trying to figure out who might be available, who among the Jimmy Sexton clients could be an option in play, who's interested in coming to Florida State, right? We don't know those answers. I've heard Jerry Cutts say this a few times, though I think we need to reiterate it. This is a much more attractive job because of that football-only building now being open, being state-of-the-art,
Yep.
being right there. The renovation of Doak Campbell Stadium on the west side makes that stadium very, very attractive, I think, for a coach, but also bringing in the money from those seats. So it should be attractive to a lot of coaches, to the right coach who candidly isn't thinking, well, I'll just wait and sit and find that SEC or Big Ten job. This is not a unique job. This is one that I think you have to find the right guy. But again, ultimately, got to recruit Florida, got to recruit Georgia, got to make that happen, got to develop the players. We've talked about the timeline, and I think this has been the toughest one to pinpoint. Like you said, Where are the goalposts? Have they moved this or that? My struggle still is the December 3rd signing period window. It is a huge, huge consideration. It should be, because you don't have that window around December 19th or 21st anymore. You don't have the luxury of hiring a coach, bringing in prospects for official visits or whatnot, and then getting them to sign. There really isn't a lot of time. So my question is just, at some point, Mike Norvell is going to win enough games where maybe some statement needs to be made that he's coming back, just so that prospects know who they are signing with as a coach. Or, hey, trust us, it's not Mike Norvell. These are very difficult, I think, considerations, because parents are going to advise their son, where are you going to go? Again, with the portal, it's not 4 years of your life. It's maybe the next year or two. But the consideration is, why should a parent encourage their kid, their young man, to sign with Florida State when the coaching uncertainty is where it is? The calendar is just not favorable, and it hasn't been favorable for weeks and weeks. I think if Mike Norvell had beaten Clemson, and this is just total hypothetical,
Big
right?
if. Yep. Hypothetical.
Big if, right? maybe you just say, hey, Norvell beat another big rival. You presume that another win's going to come along the way, bowl eligibility. This was kind of my argument that if they got a rivalry win and got to at least 6-6, you could almost just say Norvell's going to be retained. The evaluation is not great compared to the standard of Florida State, but it's at least improvement off of 2024. The problem I have is you're running out of time for a lot of these big picture considerations, especially when it comes to recruiting.
I'm going to be careful on how I word this question to you, because it's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a lot of speculation. Do you think that maybe Florida State is sandbagging here because they're not in love with the crop of coaches that could be or are already available? Like, is maybe the sandbagging due to the fact that they're just not in love with a candidate? Like, there's not an easy path forward, especially with a lot of programs now throwing their hat into the ring. I mean, you have LSU, you have Florida, you have Auburn. You're going to have more programs probably that have openings up. Is this maybe more of a tactile thing where Florida State just isn't in love with a candidate like a James Franklin that's already unemployed, and they're waiting for somebody that is still going to be employed by a program, like maybe a Glenn Schumann at UGA or a John Sumrall at Tulane, or did he might have just got an extension? I can't. There's extensions popping up all over. Like, I guess that's my question. Is like, do you feel like this is just sandbagging as they see the playing field, so they can see the playing field more fully, and maybe that would be the reason why you're waiting and holding out, and maybe Mike Norvell is able to beat a Clemson? Obviously, that's not true. That did not happen. Maybe Mike Norvell wins the rest of his games, and then you have that decision to weigh a little bit more fruitfully. You know, he did win the rest of his games. He did beat a rival. Now, that's a dangerous game to play, right? Because you have the entire fan base that's sick of him and wants him gone regardless of how he finished the season on a bookend. But is that something to consider, do you think, or is that over speculating it?
I think it's an interesting discussion because any coach that Florida State's pursuing is in the middle of a successful season, whether it's a John Sumrall.
Apart from James Franklin, who, sorry to cut you off there, that's the smoke and mirrors. It's that James Franklin is interested in this job. Which conversely is also interested in Virginia Tech, and guess who's playing this weekend? Sorry, Bob, continue.
No, I think it's an interesting discussion because the James Franklin one is he might just be a better fit for Virginia Tech, having recruited the Northeast so well, in his dozen or so years at Penn State. Also, James Franklin toyed around with this job back in 2019 and used it as leverage to get an extension up at Penn State. So how many people remember that, maybe felt jilted by that decision 6 years ago and aren't wild about a James Franklin now? Whether it's Georgia's coordinator or somebody else's hotshot coordinator, what if they're in the playoff hunt? What decisions do they have to make about their future with their current team, as well as what's best for them and their family and their career? It's all coming together with a calendar that's not beneficial. Again, I've kind of said the NFL calendar is so spread out wonderfully because the NFL maximizes its ratings and its opportunities. But it's almost like you've got the draft 1 week after the season, and then you've got free agency in the middle of the playoff, right? I mean, where the high school signing window appears is in a tough spot if you're changing coaches. Where the transfer portal sits is really in an immediate spot right after the bowl season. But how many teams are still going to be in the playoff too? It's tough. I don't know who is truly available and truly interested right now that also you're willing to say, we'll give you $10 million annually to come on down, hire whatever OC and DC you want, and make it truly give him everything that he needs to make it work. And pay Mike Norvell his salary at 85% until he finds another job. I think you're asking the right question is, does Florida State know what the pool of candidates looks like? And maybe they're just not bowled over with them, so to speak.
Yeah. Jay Holmes asked, and then we'll nip in the bud the coaching discussion, because you can honestly talk about this coaching discussion week by week, every week, and new information changes, and we basically everything changes from week to week as you get more information. Do you see any case that Mike Norvell comes back next year? For me, unfortunately, yes, I do see a case where he comes back next year. It's not pretty, it's not exciting, but I don't think it's a guarantee that he gets fired. I think there's a guarantee that he gets fired eventually. If Mike Norvell comes back next year, I'm not predicting sunshine and roses for Florida State in 2026 with that football schedule. I think you're bringing back Mike Norvell next year to eat those losses and then get rid of him the next year, unless he pulls something miraculous. But that being said, I don't know about you, Bob. I do see a case where Mike Norvell comes back next year. Now, if he loses out the rest of his games, forget about it. I would be utterly shocked if he's Florida State's head football coach by the end of this calendar year. But I do think that with the right wins and with the right convincing and the factors that are at play, whether that be the buyout, whether that be Florida State not being in love with the coaching pool, as we kind of theorized just now on Seminole Sidelines, whether it be the administration being hung on the fact that Norvell is really, really, really good personally and organizationally within the football program. There's a lot of things that you could hamstring together and stitch together to make a case as to why he would be back next year. It wouldn't be very well woven, and there would be holes in it entirely, and it certainly would not be popular, Bob. But that's kind of where I stand. Do you think that there's a case that he could be back next year?
Again, I don't think there are specific goalposts in my understanding or my thinking, but I think there is a rationale, again, if he beats Florida, is 6-6 or better, that there is a chance he could return. But now, a lot of people don't want to hear that. Let me rationalize where it could improve. You need to sign the best 20 or however many prospects sign in December.
25 right now. Oh, you meant early signees.
Right. I think you need to hit it hard as far as getting in those high school signings. Then the portal opens up in January again. I'm still a believer that you need an NFL cap guy, an NFL general manager type, somebody who can really manage the big picture, who can also help you with recruiting and player development. The best thing about Florida State is the fans and the support of the fans, but also the recruiting hotbed that you're in. I mean, that's what has made people like Bobby Bowden, of course, right? But the players who have come along through the years that he and his staffs have recruited have made this one of the top programs in college football. I don't want to say it's one of the best jobs in college football because it's in the wrong conference right now. So from a money standpoint, let me just say it. It's not one of the best jobs in college football for a lot of reasons. It is a good job, though, for a lot of other reasons, such as the new facilities, the fans, the recruiting opportunities. Again, to the big picture question, could he come back? Yes. But I still want somebody who can really take a very deep hands-on approach with recruiting, portal, managing the cap, helping make the decisions, helping evaluate coaches, who's developing players well and who isn't. I think Mike Norvell knows some of that too. Do we think this entire assistant coaching staff could come back in 26? I would push back on that. I would think some more changes could be made. There were 6 last offseason. There could be more. I think change needs to come about. I just don't know what that change is yet. And I do think these next few games will start to answer those questions.
Maybe Derek as a GM, you bring in an NFL-style GM with experience there, and maybe your talent acquisition gets a little bit better. We're going to take a 60-second break. On the other side, we're going to talk about Norvell's presser today, which if you missed it, man, if you were, it's not 4th of July. Certainly, it's the furthest thing removed from it, but there were some fireworks today, some surprise fireworks in Norvell's presser. We're going to be back in 60 seconds right here on Seminole Sidelines.
Hey, Seminole fans! Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Roll Tribe! Florida State's 31-17 win over Alabama kicked off an exciting season for Seminole fans to enjoy with the Osceola's free morning newsletter. Since 1982, the Osceola has provided reliable coverage of Seminole sports and now offers a free daily newsletter with the option to upgrade to full access with a paid subscription. For more information about free or premium subscriptions, visit theosceola.com. Get 31% off your first year subscription and receive $25 off any Osceola branded merch. Visit theosceola.com.
Welcome back to Seminole Sidelines. Nick Carlisle here with Bob Ferrante on a Monday that, well, if you were expecting coach speak this morning from Mike Norvell, you got a fair bit of coach speak, but you also got probably one of his best tangents as a head coach here at Florida State, likely since his rant after going 0-4 to start the 2021 season. Bob and I were talking before the show. It felt very similar in tone and implications, but it just felt like whereas the rant that he had after Syracuse maybe landed at just the right spot, this rant feels like it came a few weeks too late, at least to me. Bob, you were there today when Mike Norvell went on a rant of about 7 minutes or so when I don't even know what directly the question. What was the question that was asked, Bob?
Of course, this was a Corey Clark question, and hats off to Corey.
Of course.
For asking this question, which essentially was about the future of Florida State football in 26. And then it followed up. There were some follow-up questions after that, but truly, Mike Norvell spent 6 minutes going down various rabbit holes about what he's done and what this program can do. And it kind of blew my mind. I mean, in the moment, it was like, this is a lot. This is a lot just to throw out there. But he clearly used the opportunity to message. It
almost felt like a sabbatical. It almost felt like, I don't know, getting into that. What are those boxes? You're Catholic, right? Are you Catholic, Bob? No.
A bad Catholic, yes. A bad
Okay.
Catholic.
So it's like a confessional thing. It's like talking to the priest on the other side of the confessional, but Mike Norvell was screaming into the void almost. He needed to get things off of his chest today, it almost felt like. Continue.
So I didn't mean to intentionally fact check this, I guess, but I found some faults in it, and maybe can we workshop this? Can we talk through it? He started to talk about he's won a championship everywhere he's been. And I started thinking about it. He won a title at Memphis and he won a title at Florida State. We can call them state titles if you want to call wins over Florida and Miami state titles. Winning a title everywhere he's been is really a stretch. I can't find anything rational that he won at Arizona State. Won some games in a weird Pac-12 back at that point. Won some bowl games. Certainly worthy of him getting that Memphis job. He was the youngest head coach in college football when Memphis hired him, right? So there are definitely some reasons why he got that job. Didn't win titles everywhere. The big one, though, that he did lean in heavily, I think, Nick, on the development and the contributions. He definitely used the word contribution of those 24 and 25 signees. And when you look at it, there's a lot of 24 offensive signees who have contributed. Very, very few defensive signees. Why did they bring in 20 plus transfers this offseason? And almost all of them, what I think 10 of the 11 starters on offense against Alabama were transfers, except for Javon Boggs at that point.
Yep.
That doesn't show you that you've brought in guys who can play right away in year two. So maybe he just said, I can't trust him yet. I still got to develop him. But there's still that lean on the portal. I just have mixed feelings about what he said. He's clearly messaging and maybe not fact-checking himself in real time. He just wanted to say it. But it felt like certain things I'm hearing him and I'm saying, well, that's not exactly a great argument. If you're kind of a lawyer stating your case, stating your job, why you should still be here, why you've done a great job. He has at times done a great job, but at others, 2024 and 25, it just hasn't. Right. I mean, just a lot of things that he said today, I think just didn't sit well as far as just you can't make that argument, coach. Like you can't just stand there and let us transcribe it and then write it. It just didn't feel right to me at that point.
No, and it's the conversation around recruiting I found particularly interesting because it is a lot of projecting. I think it's projecting a better future, as it is projecting. I mean, something exciting, something good for boosters and fans to get behind. But really, I find the "we've got great young talent" drum a very weird one to bang because this has been arguably, and no, I think almost definitively the weakest part of Mike Norvell as a head coach is his recruiting operation and the evaluations of him and the staff in the first couple of recruiting cycles. Now, maybe truly things they did hit on some of these guys in the 2024 and 2025 class. I think absolutely unequivocally you can say that the 2025 class, they have already hit on more prospects assuredly than they have in, I would argue, the 2023 class. I mean, what you've got Jabril Rawls. I'm struggling to come up with that next guy right now behind Rawls without looking at that recruiting list. But even some of your 2024 guys, it's like, well, where's Landon Thomas? He's kind of fallen behind. Luke Kromenhoek's already left the program. Cam Davis has been shoved down the running back room and is I would say is a surefire transfer candidate at this point. So I don't know what bench he's standing on, and I felt like the recruiting angle was a weird drum to bang in this instance. And I found it even more interesting that he mentioned and brought up the fact that we're not in practice anymore so that we don't see it, almost as like a reactionary, like, well, I see it here, you guys just don't see it. And then it went into that whole outside noise conversation where you kind of just want to grab him by the collar and say, I don't think this is helping them. Like, I think they're hearing the outside noise, whether you want them to or not. It feels like that, and they have talked about outside noise in previous press conferences as well. I mean, Sawchuk and Juice Cryer talked about the outside noise. It just felt preachy, but not, as you say, necessarily fact checked. It felt almost like projecting in a way.
Yeah, and I took a little bit of time to scroll through some of the 24 names. There are some guys who are developing. I think it's some quality. It's not enough quantity of guys. Again, when you look at, that 24 class, like Luke Kromenhoek decided to move on for various reasons, right? You've already lost a Denas White and a D.D. Holmes.
Denas White ain't going to play here.
Right. We saw Hakeem Williams move on. There are enough instances of the last three classes, if we're going to extend it to 23, where there are some guys there that are contributing. Like you mentioned, Jabril, Edwin Joseph is there. Sam Singleton is kind of a late bloomer all of a sudden. There are some good examples, yes, but it feels like that reliance on the portal is for a reason, because not enough of these high school guys have developed, let's say, on a schedule. Now, if there are some more Sam Singletons out there on the practice field that, to your point, maybe we aren't seeing because Mike Norvell is seeing them or the other coaches are, okay, well, maybe we see them down the stretch this year. Maybe we see them next year. But this is tough in the portal era to say there are some guys who are developing and we just haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, I mean, and some of those guys in the 2024 class as well. I mean, Ricky Knight, not with the football team, currently indefinitely suspended. Guys like Kai Bates, Charles Lester, Jamari Howard, that huge defensive back class has really failed to make an impact in their second year, and that's at a position that's easier to break through than some others. I guess in the moment, did you feel like this was a coach that was publicly kind of advocating to higher powers as to why he shouldn't get fired, and really
Yeah.
kind of just campaigning, which I don't know. I mean, you would use the outlet of the media for this, but obviously there's certainly been conversations, I'm sure, behind closed doors at some point. This felt very much like an ad campaign rather than a vote of confidence in himself and his staff and his football team.
And I would just lean on this. I do think Mike Norvell and Michael Alford meet every week, sometimes multiple times a week. I mean, we've reported this in the past. Jerry Cutts has written it. So it's not new when you hear they've met, right? Only they know how they feel about each other and about what the program's done and where it can go. I do wonder if Mike Norvell has some amount of confidence in what he's heard from Michael Alford and feels good about saying these types of things, knowing that he has 3 games to go. I think that's been one of the biggest questions since Mike Norvell said this. I've called it an epic rant. I think that's what I'll call it for a while. Since this epic rant, it's almost stuck in with me that he might feel he's going to get these 3 games regardless of the wins or losses. Now, again, I don't think anything's a certainty as far as 2026, but I think he says things for a reason. I don't think he just talked for 6 minutes because he liked the question. I think the question was teed up very well by Corey at a time where Mike Norvell had to deliver something or felt like he could deliver something passionate, right?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. And something that I just thought about. Do you remember last year? Do you remember the moment in that catastrophe of a season where Mike Norvell came in on a Monday and you could almost tell that he had been told by Michael Alford that he was getting the rest of the season and he wouldn't be fired at the end of the season? It's almost like the lights turned on. The body language improved massively. You can tell. It might have been the week after he fired Fuller, Atkins, Tugans, and some others. Do you remember that press conference where he looked more like himself after he knew that he had job security? Do you think that this is essentially a similar note where you kind of alluded to it? And maybe this is the solution to all the questions that we've been asking, is that he has already been given those 3 games. Now he can get up on his pedestal and say these things. He's going to show a little bit more passion, show a little bit more juice, knowing that he does have those 3 games. And now if these 3 games are do or die, do you feel like that's a similar thing? Is that possibly what today was?
I think so. And I think he knows that we in the media will be writing about this, talking about it on shows. It'll be a clip on Instagram or TikTok or whatnot. It'll be a YouTube short. It will be out there. It will get to parents. It will get to players. And I think I do subscribe to the theory that players are fighting to make this season better. Not that they're fighting for Mike Norvell. I don't think they wake up every day and go, I'm going to fight to keep Mike Norvell's job. I don't think that's how it works. I think they're fighting for themselves and their teammates. And I do feel like this is a close enough team as far as you look at the lens of 105 guys, and they're going to be pretty close because of the time you spend together. I think Mike Norvell knows he's got 3 games to figure out a lot of things. I think it was, I hate to use the word calculated, but I think he knew what he was doing when he heard the question. He felt like he could tee off on it. And really, again, this goes out into the social media. It goes out onto all the mainstream sites. Once it's heard and said, I think it will get back to players and to families. His hope is probably that it resonates with enough guys to keep the hammer down on the gas and to keep fighting in the practices to get some wins on these next 3 games.
It feels like every single week is a must win for Mike Norvell, but I do think that Mike Norvell and his team are going to have to win with Virginia Tech coming into Doak Campbell Stadium on Saturday. I think you need to give your team a chance at bowl eligibility. Now, granted, that bowl eligibility does not get completely eliminated with a loss on Saturday, but obviously something that we talked about at the end of the show, you're going to have to go on the road to Carter Finley Stadium and beat NC State, which is a boogeyman for this program. You're also going to have to go into the Swamp and beat Florida, that has a very, very good defense, regardless of the showing that they just had the previous game against Kentucky. I think if you can get your team on the brink of bowl eligibility, maybe give them something a little bit extra to play for. I think getting a bowl game should be the primary focus here. Beyond winning out in the bookend of the season, you get that extra bowl practice, you get that valuable time to develop some of your younger players. And hey, if you truly have that elite talent that you have found in the 2025 and the 2024 classes, this is your opportunity to grow them a little bit more. It's not an opportunity that Florida State had last season, obviously going 2-10. I think that's where the emphasis is going to be. I think that really makes this weekend a must-win for Florida State and Mike Norvell. Would you agree?
Yeah, I feel like every game is a referendum on a coach and on a program. And sometimes the players get a pass there, even though I feel like the players were responsible for that loss at Clemson much more than the coaches, right?
Yes.
But it feels like the referendum is just about every week on Mike Norvell. Fans aren't going to maybe feel all that much better about a win over Virginia Tech. I don't think they felt just crazy good about the Wake Forest win. It was just, it had been the first win in a month or so, and it felt like some positive momentum was coming out of this. I'm curious, is this new November mantra again, is this a slogan or is it reality? Is this really a thing that the players have kind of rallied around and can still rally around after a loss? I think Mike Norvell really needs this win against Virginia Tech. But again, the page very quickly turns toward NC State and then very quickly turns toward Florida. It's pretty much you're getting into the territory of 1-0 this week means something, but stacking wins means a lot more. And I know coaches don't want to hear that because their focus is on you can only win one game at a time. But it feels like you got to stack some wins.
Yeah. An important game regardless, coming up on Saturday, another night game, which, God, they're killing us, Bob. They're actually killing us. They're bludgeoning us with a hammer. Great for atmosphere, great for fans, not great for us. A lot of late nights. A lot of late nights covering a football team that's not been fun to watch. Well, I take that back. It was fun to watch for just a moment in time, a brief reprieve from the doom and gloom that has been Florida State football over the past 12 months. Bob, you're going to be able to take us out here to end the Monday Seminole Sidelines. Thank you all so much for watching the Front Row Knowles crew. I almost got it. The Front Row Knowles crew will be back on Wednesday with Bob. That'll be up at 3 p.m. in its normal time. And anything else that's coming on the Osceola this weekend, Bob? Anything to promote? Anything to forecast for this next week of content before we sign off?
Good basketball game Tuesday night. I know everybody's still in football mode and wants to talk about where this team is going, but Florida State going down to Florida, 7 p.m. Tuesday night on the SEC network. So again, that's a program that maybe you're not going to be able to compete with on the national stage as a potential Final Four team and a national title contender. But basketball is ramping up and very much interested to see where Luke Laux takes this team, where Brooke Wyckoff takes the women's team. But again, like Nick said, we'll be back Wednesday, Front Row Knowles and Seminole Sidelines, and we will talk to you later.